In the words of the rabbis, Esav Sone Yaakov. Esav, the Romans, the Europeans, hate the Jews. It's an ancient hate. It's the hate of Esav, his brothers, Jacob, that's his Jacob and Esau. The hate between these two brothers. One who is not fit, the other is cunning. So the two hates continue through the world, and the world we live in today. We have another hate on the other side, which was our half-brothers, the Arabs. We are the Jews in the middle, the messenger's choice, turning adversity to strength. Now, he writes, let me get a pencil here. What is your name? He replied, Jacob, said he. Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed. The war is a tremendous war against Jacob. Jacob, who is Israel. And there we saw the Nephilim, the giants, and we were in our eyes like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. The world is full of giants. Although the Jewish mission and anti-Semitism present a challenge to everybody, Jew hatred specifically confronts Jews in a unique way, impacting both our individual Jewish identity and collective self-esteem. To expect otherwise would be to expect something beyond normal human capacity, and Jews are nothing if not very human. So let's acknowledge and understand it. Let's also do something about it. Put another way, let's ask whether Jews themselves have become somewhat afraid of the big, bad Jew. So he writes, now I have to say that this person is tremendously courageous. He is so, what you say, he's so calling it straight. He's saying the straight out truth. The truth that Esav hates us, and it's still it's going on then. Although immediately we have a confrontation with the Arabs, which is Yishmael, and it's still going on also. And we're in the between of that. The talent should, he writes, let me put a little light on this, maybe help me, yeah, that the Jewish people are sometimes worn out and discouraged. This is the challenge to the Jewish identity. It's understandable. The course and the scope of Jewish pain is so deep and beyond description that the continued commitment to the Jewish people is remarkable. They've endured millennia of relentless hatred, bullying, oppression, crusades, pogroms, and the Holocaust, producing multi-generational trauma that is profound and also beyond description. The toll on the Jewish psyche is immense, as Jew haters have been sought to solve the Jewish problem in every generation, leading to deep and lasting scars. Rabbi Lord Sachs poignantly writes of the consequences of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, collective traumas, and like you say, that, like I said before, is that in the religious Jewish community, you have many descendants of people who were traumatized in the Holocaust. And it has a tremendous psychological impact for the bad. Collective traumas of this magnitude take several generations to play themselves out, and we still live with their aftershocks. Like Jacob, after his wrestling match with the angel, we limp. We're a little bit beaten. In clinical terms, it's accurate to say that the Jewish people suffer from multi-generational PTSD. That's very interesting because I have that in my family now. I'm a fourth-generation American from St. Louis, and I married the Polish Jews from the Holocaust survivor who survived the Holocaust. So how do we respond to those very profound experiences and pressures? How to retain our sense of self and define our identity? There are, broadly speaking, two approaches to these questions. Approach number one is defense. When Jews encounter anti-Semitism, which is now happening more broadly and especially in Western and English-speaking countries other than the U.S., which has been happening, but it's as of this date, which is today is the 9th of Elul, the year 5785. This is, what day is today in the English? Can't really read it. It's the 3rd day of September, 2025. We're encountering anti-Semitism. They can feel inferior, buying into the charges against them that they are in some way the problem. Take them to Auschwitz, show them Auschwitz, then they won't hate us so much. In response to being disliked, Jews try to adapt to the accusations against them and hope for acceptance. They appeal to their detractors to stop hating them, saying, "We're not what you accuse us of. Look at all the wonderful things we've done. We are just like you, and everyone should be nice." The past couple of centuries, the Jewish people have been playing defense. That's been what we've been doing. That's Reform Judaism. If we could only be more like the Gentiles. 250 years of defense, many Jews cope with an anti-Semitism by trying to fit in. They undergo social and intellectual makeovers to change themselves into the opposite of what the anti-Semites claim to hate about Jews. Starting in the early 1800s, the objection to the Jews was that they were too different. Convinced that by becoming like everyone else they would neutralize the detractors, Jews made an effort to become less Jewish. We eat Gentile food now. We wear Gentile clothes. Most German and Austrian Hungarian Jews were convinced that if they demonstrated national loyalty and contributed to society, the hate would disappear. They reacted to rising anti-Semitism by discarding much of Judaism and disavowing Israel as their homeland. But even after all the Jews' contributions to Germany, the nation they adored still sent them to the concentration and death camps. Siegfried Marcus's invention of the first gas-powered car, Heinrich Hertz's vision, birthing everything from radio to radar, Einstein's theories of relativity, and Casimir Funk's discovery of vitamins did not stave off the Holocaust. It's happening today. But now it's the whole world, not every single country. But my goodness gracious, what's happened to the West, who are the descendants of our brother Asaph? They fall into obvious Jew hatred. I always recall with trembling being told by a survivor that some German Jews who had served with distinction for the fatherland in World War I went to the gas chambers proudly wearing their uniforms, medals, and all. Up until the very end, they were convinced they were more German than Jew, and it could not happen to them. Pride. The Enlightenment Jews and Reform movement they initiated attempted to fit in by discarding the core Torah idea of Jewish peoplehood. Now today, in the St. Louis Jewish Light, the president of the Federation and his husband were pictured. All of their thinking now is Rainbow Coalition. But they have a tremendous, tremendous audience, which doesn't show up except twice a year, but they have a big, big influence on that audience in terms of gentilizing them. So over here you also see that the intermarriage rate. So on the paper, they publish the Jewish paper, St. Louis Jewish Light. It publishes the weddings, the engagements, and the intermarriage is incredible. There's nothing there. They call it Jewish, and there are Jews there, but it's really mixed. They reasoned that if the Jews were only a religion, then they would simply be Germans. Okay, so the Germans, they're Hungarians, they're French, or of the Mosaic persuasion. And the host nations would accept them. However, this approach failed dramatically. The father of modern Zionism, Theodor Herzl, declared, "We have honestly striven everywhere, to merge ourselves in the social life of surrounding countries and to preserve only the faith of our fathers. It has not been permitted to us." Herzl and the early Zionist ideologues took the opposite approach. They believed that by becoming a secular Jewish nation, which is what you have now, and Israel is a secular country, with Judaism neutered, they would be like all other nations and then be accepted. This situation to the Jewish problem has also failed, as the Jewish state became the lightning rod for new anti-Semitism, and it is burning now. Jews can attempt to change themselves, but so can anti-Semites. As Rabbi Sachs has said, Jew hatred is usually justified by what a culture holds most dear. During the Middle Ages, it was religion, and Jews were charged with killing God. In the modern period, it was science, and Jews were deemed by science to be inferior race. Today, post-Enlightenment and post-Hiroshima, neither religion nor science are the most prestigious such sources of authority. Post-Holocaust, the highest values are human rights, so the Jewish state is portrayed as the worst violator. Now, let me see what happened to our light. Something happened to the light. Is this a flaw in my equipment? What is going on? Turn the light on, turn the light off. There's the light, but the recording is poor. I'm going to have to reboot this. And so we'll have a short shear and try to get right back into it. Hopefully the screen, I don't know if this is normal or what. It seems very dark. Okay, I'm going to keep going on. We'll keep, just in the dark. I don't know, it's a little dark on my screen. Maybe it's my screen, but now he says, writes like this. I think this was pretty close to where I'm at. On campuses today and in refined societies, Jewish students and others are accused of the crime of being Zionists. The recent abandonment of Israel by many diaspora Jews is perhaps subconsciously motivated by the hope that by positioning themselves as disconnected or pro-Palestinian, they can fit into a progressive society that has declared Zionism unacceptable. Many young Jews have become passionate opponents of Israel, even leaders of Israel, as by becoming condemning Israel, they will eliminate the cause of their insecurity and alienation. This goes together with the abandonment of Judaism and everything that makes Jews exceptional. The new Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. These movements do not reflect the deep Jewish ideal whose name they adopted. Tikkun Olam have become synonymous with progressive social justice, the Rainbow Coalition. In striving so hard to fit in, they have inadvertently dispensed with the needs for Jews. If Jews only exist to advocate for social justice, wouldn't the world be better off if Jews traded their tribal identity for membership in the global activist community? Such a logical conclusion of this popular modern definition of Jewishness was articulated clearly by Pulitzer Prize winner Michael Chabon. I don't know how you pronounce it, maybe Chabon, when he gave the convocation at the 2018 Reform Rabbis' graduation. Speaking to the future Reform leaders, he encouraged them to embrace universalism over Jewish particularism, to encourage their flock to marry into the tribe that sees nations and borders as antiquated canards, and ethnicity as a construct prone, like all constructs, to endless reconfiguration, even if it meant the end of the Jews. Now, he said those words, the end of the Jews, and so on and so forth, so there's a lot to be said there. I don't want to get into with him too much of what he said, but this really tells you, right in a picture, the St. Louis Jewish light. Without knowing the nature of anti-Semitism, Jews can become confused by insecurity, fear, and shame. Jews who have lost touch with their mission might think that they are the problem because they are hated, rather than understanding that they are hated because they hold the answer. The phenomenon of Jews turning themselves into pretzels was observed by the historian Bernard Lewis in Semites and Anti-Semites. The neurotic reaction which one finds among some Jews to the impact of anti-Semitism, by accepting, sharing, expressing, and even exaggerating the basic assumptions of the anti-Semite, as opposed to Chabon, what's his name? The political commentator David Greenfield has characterized this defensive Jewish response as the real ghetto mentality. The ghetto Jew is the Jew who has not found a Jewish identity. He has let his enemies define him. His efforts to go to fight a losing battle because he has allowed the enemy inside his head. He has failed to build a positive Jewish identity. He is other-directed. He cares little what Jews think of Jews. What interests him is what everyone else thinks of Jews. He will enthusiastically fight for the causes of others rather than for his own, to avoid any accusations of selfishness or bipartisanism. In doing so, he thinks that he is helping Jews because to him, the Jews could only be helped by changing how others see them. For all his sophistication and erudition and education, he is an empty house with no one living inside. That's the fact. Go to the Reformed Temple and listen to what goes on there. It is boring. Really, really, really boring. If they can't work people up over leftist ideas, rainbow coalitions, etc., they've got nothing. This is also the story of Israel's far-left peace activists. They were unable to see the deep hatred of the other side. They assumed that it was primarily Jewish avarice preventing peace, and not the intransigence and Jew hatred of Hamas and much of the Palestinian population. They were certain before October 7 that the settlements were the main stumbling block preventing peace with the Palestinians and causing anti-Zionism to rage. Then came October 7th and everything changed. Batya Holin, a survivor of the Kibbutz Kfar Aza, lost her faith in that narrative. They not only killed friends of mine, they killed my beliefs. Amid Simon Tov Bahaba, who lost her entire family in the attack, shared my deepest beliefs were turned upside down. I had thought the Gaza Strip was full of people who looked like us and wanted to live in peace. Amazing that the kibbutz near Oz, which had a quarter of its population murdered or kidnapped on October 7th, had planned to participate in a protest rally on that very day with the slogan that peace cannot be achieved because of Jewish settlements. They did not make it to the rally. The pogrom blasted a hole in their mistaken assumptions, and they were forced to come to terms with Jew hatred. They had made the classical Jewish mistake of falling for the excuse instead of discerning the reason behind the hate. Now, this sign here, Mafginim, Be'er-Sheva, I don't know what Mafginim means. B'Yom Shabbat, and then he gives a date, and so on and so forth. Now, what's that about? So, faced with the aftermath of October 7th and the global surge in anti-Semitism, Jews on defense can only stare into the abyss and wonder, yet this was not the first time the Jews have been shocked out of their misconception about how the world views them. Some 2,500 years ago, the Jews of Shushan, Susa, were confused when the genocide decree was announced. They had been living so good in Persia. When Hitler came to power and forced the Jews to wear a yellow Star of David on their arms, a German Jewish community who had mistakenly believed they had won acceptance were stunned and disheartened. Similarly, 150 years ago, Herzl and the Jews of Western Europe were shaken to their core by the Dreyfus affair. A man who had been an officer in the French army was accused out of nowhere for treason. When France descended into anti-Semitic hysteria, Herzl described the shared dismay. Listen to what he says. He says, the most profoundly affected were the Jews themselves. The confidence of Jews in the liberal order was severely shaken. That such an affair could occur in France, the cradle of modern democracy. This stunned many. The fact that a public, not just the riffraff, schooled for over a century in the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, could still contemptuously regard Dreyfus, an utterly assimilated Jew. He was completely Gentilized. He was an officer in the French army. As an outsider, seemed to prove that assimilation was no defense against anti-Semitism. In 2024, I have heard the exact same sentiments expressed by countless Jewish friends. They just substituted France with USA or Canada or Europe. In high schools, on college campuses, and in multicultural offices, Jews today often feel lost in environments where their educated peers, professors, and social justice organizations dropped all of their lofty principles when it came to the Jews and Israel. From high schools to NYU to Google offices, as I've heard many horror stories of Jews feeling abandoned and unsafe in their institutions and corporations. Despite all the DEI programs and sensitivity to microaggressions against every other group, it is certainly distressing when you are on campus and most of the student body, as well as the professors, condemn Israel and directly or indirectly accuse you, a Jewish bystander, of being guilty of something very serious, something you felt very little connection to in the past. What does Israel have to do with you? You may wonder. It certainly is distressing when comedian Dave Raphael says to millions on Saturday Night Live that the delusions that Jews run show business is not a crazy thing to think, but it's a crazy thing to say out loud. He continued with a deep insight. You know the rules of perception. If they're black, then it's a gang. If they're Italian, it's a mob. If they're Jewish, it's a coincidence and should never speak about it. Dave was correct in observing both Jewish influence as well as the Jewish discomfort and acknowledging it. The answer, Dave, is that Jewish success is real, but it's not a conspiracy and it's not a coincidence. We Jews should talk about it. We should be proud of our talents and accomplishments. This book is talking about it. The anti-Semites are reminding you that you are in the core of your being and not just a cultural curiosity. You're part of the Jewish people. While there are myriad reasons why many Jews do not feel strongly connected to their people or Judaism today, years of hate creates great discomfort around being Jewish, and it can be observed in quantifiable ways. Growing assimilation and intermarriage rates, lower observance rates, lack of a philanthropy, prioritization for Jewish causes, waning involvement of the Jewish community in illiteracy in Judaism and Israeli studies. Nobody knows what it means to be Jewish. In 2013, a Pew Research survey asked American Jews what it means to be Jewish. 73% answered remembering the Holocaust. 69% replied that being Jewish meant leading an ethical life. 56% thought it was working for justice and equality, and 42% thought that being Jewish meant having a good sense of humor. While many of these areas can definitely be considered part of the Jewish heritage, most are not unique to Jews. And less than 30% reference anything about being or acting Jewish in any distinct way. Author Charles Murray also observed the phenomenon of weak Jewish self-esteem when he did research on outside Jewish success and influence. I have personal experience with the reluctance of Jews to talk about Jewish accomplishment. While other peoples naturally embrace their legacy and accomplishments, he noticed a distinct aversion of Jews to discuss what Murray called for a systematic discussion of one of the most obvious topics of all, the extravagant representation of Jews relative to their numbers in the top ranks of the arts, science, law, medicine, finance, entrepreneurship, and the media. Murray concluded in response to Jewish hesitancy to self-appreciate, and so this Scottish Gentile from Iowa hereby undertakes to tell the story. Now the fact is that Esav hates Yaakov. The Europeans hate the Jews from an ancient hate, not a beginning one. So the Scottish Gentile from Iowa. What many Jews wonder, do they have to be proud of? Like the fourth son of the Passover Seder, the one who does not know how to ask questions. They don't even know what they don't know. Despite their people's unparalleled legacy of 3,000 plus years of outside positive global impact, despite being part of an incredibly sophisticated and rich intellectual and spiritual heritage, many Jews have lost a basic understanding of what being Jewish is about. I believe that the continuous assault on Jews, combined with the allure of assimilation, has led to a crushing erosion of Jewish self-confidence and self-awareness. Under the agonizing repressiveness of thousands of years of persecution, Jews have occasionally lost sight of their empowering legacy. It is a sad irony that Hitler understood the Jewish people's unique contributions and missions. Philo-Semites admire their positive influence on human affairs, but many Jews today seem to be in the dark. This is Baruch Fleischman. You've been listening to the Tikkun Elevator Kollel. Now what?